Marcus Chen pushed his mop across the cold metal floor of the spaceship and tried to ignore the looks that people gave him as they walked past him. Every day, without saying a single word to him, because he was just a cleaner and nobody important. At all, he had been working on the Celestial Accord for 3 years now, and in all that time, he had learned one simple truth, which was that some people were born to shine and others were born to clean up after them, and he was one of the second kind of people. The ship was huge and beautiful, and it traveled between stars, carrying important people from many different planets to meetings, where they talked about peace and trade, and things that Marcus did not really understand because nobody ever explained anything to him. He was 32 years old, and he had no family left on Earth, because his parents had died when he was young, and he had grown up in a small apartment with his grandmother, who had also passed away 5 years ago. Leaving him completely alone in the universe, Marcus had joined the ship because he wanted to see the stars and because there was nothing left for him on Earth and because the pay was good enough to live on even if the work was hard. And the other workers often made fun of him. Today was different from other days because today the Valarian Empire was sending their royal family to the ship for important peace talks, and everyone was running around trying to make everything perfect for the visitors. The Valarians were famous across the galaxy for their silver skin and their beautiful faces and their belief that they were better than everyone else, especially humans, who had only discovered space travel 100 years ago. Marcus had heard stories about them from other workers who said that the Valarians looked down on humans, like humans look down on insects, and that you should never speak to them unless they spoke to you first. Finished mopping the corridor near the observation deck and picked up his bucket to move to the next area when suddenly the main doors opened and a group of people walked in wearing clothes that sparkled like diamonds. Marcus knew right away that these were the Valarians because their skin was silver and their eyes glowed with colors he had never seen before, and they moved like they were floating instead of walking. The front of the group was a woman who was more beautiful than anyone Marcus had ever seen in his entire life, and she wore a crown made of some kind of crystal that caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. This was Princess Seraphine, and she was the daughter of the Valarian Emperor, and she was known across the galaxy for her beauty and her intelligence, and her cruelty to those she considered beneath her. Marcus tried to step aside to let them pass, but his foot caught on his bucket, and he stumbled forward, and the dirty mop water splashed across the floor right in front of the princess. For a moment, everything was silent, and Marcus felt his heart stop beating as he looked up at the princess, who was staring at him with eyes that burned like cold fire. Then she laughed, and it was not a kind laugh, but a laugh that cut through Marcus like a knife made of ice, and everyone in her group started laughing too. Spoke in a voice that was beautiful and terrible at the same time, saying that this was what happened when primitive species were allowed to work on important ships, and that humans were only good for cleaning floors and nothing else. Marcus felt his face turn red, and he wanted to say something, but no words came out of his mouth because he was too embarrassed and too scared to speak. The princess continued talking, and she said that creatures like Marcus should be grateful that the Valarians allowed them to exist at all, and that in the old days her ancestors would have used humans as servants and nothing more. All the important people on the observation deck had stopped what they were doing to watch, and Marcus could see human diplomats looking away with shame on their faces because they could not defend him. Princess Seraphine stepped closer to Marcus and looked at him like he was a bug she was thinking about stepping on, and she asked him if he had anything to say for himself. Marcus opened his mouth, but still no words came out, and the princess laughed again and said that this proved her point because humans were too stupid to even speak when spoken to. She turned to her followers and said loudly that the galaxy would be a better place if humans stayed on their little planet and stopped pretending they belonged among the stars with real civilizations. One of her guards pushed Marcus aside roughly and he fell to the ground next to his mop and bucket while the entire Valarian group walked past him without looking back. Marcus lay there for a long moment, feeling something inside him break into pieces that he did not know if he could ever put back together again. The other workers helped him up eventually and told him not to worry about it because the Valarians treated everyone badly and it was not personal. But Marcus knew that was not true. He finished his shift in silence and went back to his small room at the bottom of the ship where the workers lived, and he sat on his bed and stared at the wall for a long time. That night, Marcus could not sleep because every time he closed his eyes, he saw the princess laughing at him and heard her words echoing in his head over and over again. Around midnight, something strange started to happen, and Marcus felt a pain in his head that was worse than any headache he had ever had before, like someone was trying to crack his skull open from the inside. He fell off his bed and landed on the floor, and the pain got worse and worse until he thought he was going to die right there in his tiny room with nobody to help him. Strange images started flashing through his mind like memories, but they were not his memories because they show places he had never been and people he had never met. He saw great cities made of light floating in space, and he saw beings that looked almost human, but not quite, and they were building something wonderful and terrible at the same time. The pain became so bad that Marcus screamed, but no sound came out of his mouth, and the last thing he saw before everything went dark was a symbol burning in his mind like a star being born. His body began to glow with a soft golden light that filled his small room and spread out through the walls and into the corridors beyond, where other workers stopped and stared in confusion. Marcus Chen, the janitor, was dying, but something else was waking up inside him, and that something was older than the Valerian Empire and older than the stars themselves. The symbol in his mind pulsed one final time, and then everything went black and silent, and Marcus fell into a darkness deeper than space itself, where ancient voices were waiting to welcome him home. Marcus opened his eyes and found himself floating in a white room that he did not recognize, and there were machines all around him, making soft beeping sounds. A woman in a white coat was standing next to him, and she looked very worried, and when she saw that his eyes were open, she pressed a button on the wall and started speaking very fast. Marcus tried to ask what had happened, but his throat was dry, and the words came out as a rough sound that did not make any sense. The woman told him to stay calm and that he was in the medical bay and that he had been unconscious for 3 days, and that something very strange had happened to his body. 3 days, thought Marcus, and he tried to sit up, but his body felt different somehow, like it was lighter and stronger than it had been before. More people came into the room, including the ship captain, who was a tall woman with gray hair and a serious face, and she looked at Marcus like he was a puzzle she could not solve. The doctor started explaining what had happened, and she said that workers had found Marcus on the floor of his room, glowing with golden light, and that they had brought him to the medical bay right away. She said that his brain activity had been off every chart they had, and that his DNA had been changing at the cellular level, and that energy was coming from his body that they could not explain. Marcus listened to all of this and felt scared because he did not understand what was happening to him, but at the same time he felt something else, which was a sense that he was finally becoming who he was supposed to be. Captain asked him if he felt any different, and Marcus said yes, he felt very different, but he could not explain how. When he looked at the machines around him, he could suddenly understand how they worked, even though he had never studied medicine or technology, and he knew things that he should not know. The doctor asked him to try moving his hand, and when Marcus lifted his hand, something amazing happened because a small ball of light appeared above his palm. Everyone in the room stepped back in fear, but Marcus was not scared because the light felt like it was part of him, and he could control it as easily as he could control his own fingers. He closed his hand and the light disappeared, and the captain demanded to know what was going on, and Marcus said he did not know, but he was starting to remember things. Memories were flooding into his mind like water breaking through a dam, and he saw things that had happened millions of years ago when the galaxy was young and empty. He saw a race of beings called the architects who had traveled the universe and created life on countless worlds and guided young species until they could take care of themselves. These beings looked almost human, but they were made of light and energy, and they had powers that could create or destroy entire planets with a single thought. Marcus understood now that the architects had not died or disappeared, but had hidden themselves away waiting for the right moment to return. They had placed their essence, their memories, and their power into the DNA of the species they had created. And humans were one of those species. For millions of years, the architect inside Marcus had slept waiting for something to trigger the awakening. And that trigger had been the pain and humiliation he felt when Princess Seraphine laughed at him. Captain was asking questions, but Marcus was barely listening because he was too busy trying to understand all the new information in his head. He was Marcus Chun, the janitor, but he was also something else now, and that something else was called the Keeper of the First Light, and it was one of the most powerful architects who had ever existed. The Keeper had chosen to sleep inside human DNA because humans were special and had potential that other species did not have, and now Marcus carried all of the Keeper's knowledge and power. He got up from the bed, and his body moved smoothly and easily, like he had never known pain or tiredness in his life. The captain ordered him to stay in the medical bay, but Marcus just looked at her, and she stepped aside without knowing why, because something in his eyes made her understand that he was no longer someone she could give orders to. Marcus walked out of the medical bay and into the corridor, and as he walked, the lights got brighter and the doors opened. Before he reached them, other people stopped and stared at him because he looked different now, with his eyes glowing faintly gold and his skin seeming to shine with an inner light. Could feel the entire ship around him like it was an extension of his own body, and he could sense every person on board and what they were feeling. The Valarian delegation was still on the ship, and Marcus could feel their presence like cold spots in the warm energy that surrounded him. He walked toward the observation deck where he had been humiliated 3 days ago, and people moved out of his way without being asked. Marcus was not angry at Princess Seraphine anymore, because anger was too small a feeling for what he had become. Instead, he felt something like gratitude because her cruelty had set him free from a prison he had not known he was living in. The data architects had given him a gift that was beyond anything humans had ever possessed, and now he had to decide what to do with it. Could feel the knowledge of 1,000,000 years inside his head, and he could see the history of the galaxy stretching out behind him like a road he had already traveled. The Valarians believed they were the greatest civilization in the galaxy, but Marcus now knew that they were children playing with toys that the architects had left behind. Every advanced technology, every great discovery that the Valarians were so proud of had come from studying architect ruins that they did not really understand. Marcus reached the observation deck and stood in front of the great windows that looked out at the stars. He raised his hand and light gathered around his fingers, and he drew a symbol in the air that burned with golden fire. It was the mark of the architects, and it meant that the old ones had returned and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. Marcus Chun, the janitor, was gone forever, and in his place stood something that had the power to change everything. Princess Seraphine was sitting in her private quarters on the ship, drinking tea from a golden cup, when one of her guards came running in with fear on his face. She was annoyed at first, because nobody was supposed to enter her room without permission. But then she saw how scared the guard looked, and she put down her cup. This guard told her that something was happening on the observation deck, and that the human janitor she had laughed at 3 days ago was standing there glowing with strange light. Seraphine almost laughed again because the idea of that pathetic little man doing anything important seemed ridiculous to her. But then more guards came, and they were all scared, and they said that the ship's systems were going crazy and that energy readings were higher than anything they had ever seen. Seraphine stood up and decided she would go see for herself what all the fuss was about, because she did not believe that any human could be a threat to her. She walked through the corridors of the ship with her guards around her, and she noticed that people were running and whispering and looking very frightened. When she reached the observation deck, she stopped in the doorway because what she saw made no sense to her at all. The janitor, Marcus, was standing in the center of the room, but he was not the same man she remembered. His eyes were glowing with golden light, and symbols made of fire were floating in the air around him, and the very walls of the ship seemed to bend toward him like flowers toward the sun. Seraphine felt something she had not felt in a very long time, which was fear, real fear that made her legs weak and her heart beat fast. She forced herself to walk forward because she was a princess and she could not show weakness in front of her guards or the humans who were watching. She stopped a few feet away from Marcus, and she tried to make her voice sound strong and commanding. When she asked him what he thought he was doing, Marcus turned to look at her, and his eyes were like windows into a universe she had never seen before. He spoke, and his voice was different now because it had layers to it, like many people were speaking at the same time. He told her that he wanted to thank her for what she had done because her cruelty had woken something inside him that had been sleeping for a very long time. Seraphine did not understand what he meant, and she demanded that he explain himself because she was not used to being confused. Marcus smiled, and it was not a cruel smile or a mocking smile, but a smile of someone who knew things that she could never imagine. He raised his hand, and suddenly images appeared in the air around them, showing things that Seraphine had never seen before. She saw the birth of stars and the creation of planets and beings of light who shaped the galaxy like artists shaping clay. Marcus told her that these beings were called the architects and that they had existed before the Valarian Empire and before any civilization she knew about. He said that the architects had created life across the galaxy, including her ancestors, and that everything her people were proud of came from the gifts the architects had left behind. Seraphine wanted to argue and say that this was impossible, but the images kept showing her things that matched the oldest stories of her people. She saw architects visiting her home world millions of years ago and teaching her primitive ancestors how to use fire and build shelter and look up at the stars. Marcus told her that her precious ancient bloodline was not special at all because every species in the galaxy had been touched by the architects. He said that humans were no different from Valarians in the eyes of the architects, and that the only thing that mattered was how each species used the gifts they had been given. Seraphine felt her whole understanding of the universe crumbling around her like a building falling down. She had been raised to believe that Valarians were chosen by the universe to rule over other species, but now this man was telling her that everything she believed was a lie. She fell to her knees without meaning to, because her legs would not hold her up anymore. The other Valarians in her group were also kneeling, and some of them were crying because they could feel the truth in Marcus's words. He walked toward her, and she flinched, expecting him to hurt her or mock her the way she had mocked him, but instead he reached out his hand and helped her stand up. He told her that he was not angry at her and that he did not want revenge because those feelings were too small for what he had become. Marcus said that he understood now that she had been raised to think the way she did and that it was not entirely her fault. He told her that the universe was much bigger and more wonderful than she knew, and that her people had been living in a small room, thinking it was the whole world. Seraphine looked into his eyes and saw something there that she had never seen in anyone before. She saw kindness and wisdom and power all mixed together, and she understood that this man could destroy her with a thought if he wanted to, but he did not want to destroy her, and that made her feel worse than if he had been cruel. She asked him what he wanted from her and from her people. Marcus said he wanted nothing except for them to open their eyes and see the truth about the universe and their place in it. said that the time of the architects ruling the galaxy was over, and that younger species like the Valarians and humans needed to find their own way. But he also said that he would be watching, and that he would not allow any species to treat others the way she had treated him. Safine bowed her head, and for the first time in her life, she said she was sorry. Marcus accepted her apology and told her that saying sorry was easy, but changing was hard, and that he hoped she would work on becoming better. Then he turned and walked away, and the golden light around him faded until he looked almost like a normal human again. But Seraphine knew that nothing would ever be normal again because the universe had just changed forever. News of what happened on the Celestial Accord spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Within the days, every planet and every species had heard about the human janitor, who had become something more and who had made the proud Valerian princess kneel before him. Some people believed the stories, and some people thought they were lies, but everyone was talking about Marcus Chen and what his awakening might mean. The Valarian emperor sat on his throne made of crystal and listened to the reports from his daughter, and he did not like what he heard. He was an old man with silver skin that had turned almost gray, and eyes that had seen many things, but nothing like. This Princess Seraphine stood before him and told him everything that had happened. And she said that she believed Marcus was telling the truth about the architects. The emperor was angry because he did not want to believe that his great empire was just a child playing with toys left behind by older beings. He said that this human must be destroyed before he could threaten the Valarian way of life. Seraphine tried to argue with her father and said that Marcus was too powerful to fight, but the emperor would not listen. He called his finest warriors and told them to go to the Celestial Accord and capture or kill the human who dared to challenge Valarian supremacy. Seraphine begged to be allowed to lead the mission because she felt responsible for what had happened and because she wanted to try to prevent bloodshed. Emperor agreed because he thought his daughter wanted revenge, and that pleased him. So Seraphine gathered 50 of the best Valarian warriors, and they traveled to the Celestial Accord in warships armed with the most powerful weapons in the Empire. Marcus knew they were coming because he could feel disturbances in the energy that connected everything in the universe. Was standing in the engine room of the ship when the Valarian warriors burst through the doors with their weapons raised. They surrounded him and their leaders shouted for him to surrender or die. Marcus looked at them calmly and asked if they really thought their weapons could hurt him. The warriors fired their weapons all at once, and beams of energy flew toward Marcus from every direction. But the beams stopped in the air just inches from his body and hung there like frozen lightning. Marcus waved his hand and the energy beams disappeared like they had never existed at all. The warriors were shocked and scared, but they had been trained to fight even when they were afraid, so they pulled out their swords and charged at him. Marcus could have killed them all in a heartbeat, but he did not want to take lives if he did not have to. Instead, he reached out with his power and took the swords from their hands, and the swords floated up to the ceiling and stuck there like metal attracted to a magnet. The warriors tried to fight with their hands and feet, but every time they threw a punch or a kick, they found themselves moving in slow motion. While Marcus moved normally, he walked among them, touching each one gently on the forehead. When he touched them, something happened, because each warrior saw visions of the past. Just like Seraphine had seen, they saw the architects creating their ancestors and protecting their world from dangers they had never known about. They saw how the architects had sacrificed themselves to give younger species a chance to grow. One by one, the warriors stopped fighting and fell to their knees as they understood the truth. Princess Seraphine had been watching from the doorway, and she walked into the room slowly. She told Marcus that she had tried to convince her father not to send warriors, but he had not listened. Marcus said he knew and that he did not blame her for her father's choices. He said that he had shown the warriors the truth because he did not want to hurt them and because he hoped they would carry that truth back to their people. Seraphine asked him why he was so kind when he had the power To be cruel, Marcus thought about this question for a long time before answering. He said that power was not about what you could do, but about what you chose to do. He said that the architects had learned this lesson long ago, and that was why they had decided to step back and let younger species make their own choices. Seraphine looked at her warriors, who were still kneeling with tears running down their faces. She asked Marcus what would happen now. Marcus said that her warriors would return to her father and tell him what they had seen. He said that some Valerians would believe and some would not, and that was their choice to make. He said that he would not force anyone to accept the truth, because truth that was forced on people was not really truth at all. Seraphine felt something change inside her as she listened to him speak. She had been raised to believe that power meant controlling others and making them do what you wanted, but Marcus was showing her a different kind of power that came from wisdom and patience and love. She asked him to teach her, and he smiled and said that she would have to teach herself. Said that the best he could do was show her the path, but she would have to walk it on her own. The warriors slowly got to their feet, and Seraphine could see that they were different now. They looked at Marcus with respect instead of fear, and some of them bowed to him before leaving. When they were gone, Seraphine stood alone with Marcus in the engine room. She told him that her father would not give up and that more warriors would come. Marcus said he knew, but that he was not worried because he had faith that the truth would win in the end. He said that change was always slow and painful, but that it was worth fighting for. Seraphine wanted to stay and learn more, but she knew she had to return to her people and try to change things from the inside. She thanked Marcus for showing her mercy when she had shown him none. Then she left to face whatever future was waiting for her. Months passed, and the galaxy slowly began to change in ways that no one could have predicted. The Valerian warriors, who had been sent to kill Marcus, returned home and told everyone what they had seen and experienced. Some Valerians refused to believe them and called them traitors, but others listened and began to question everything they had been taught. The emperor grew more and more angry as he saw his people divided, and he blamed Marcus for all of it. Gathered a massive fleet of warships and prepared to attack the celestial court himself, because he could not accept that a human had more power than he did. But before he could launch his attack, something unexpected happened. Princess Seraphine stood before her people and spoke to them through every screen and speaker on every Valerian world. She told them the truth about what she had seen and what she had learned. She told them that she had been wrong to mock and humiliate other species, and that her cruelty had come from ignorance and pride. She said that the Valerians were not better than other species, but that they were also not worse. She said that all species in the galaxy were children of the architects, and that they should work together instead of fighting each other. The emperor ordered his guards to arrest his own daughter, but they refused because they had been among the warriors who had seen the true civil war almost broke out among the Valerians. But then something amazing happened. Marcus appeared in the sky above the Valerian homeworld as a projection made of golden light. He did not threaten or demand anything. Instead, he spoke in a gentle voice and asked the Valerians to listen to their own hearts. He showed them the history of the galaxy from the very beginning, and they saw how the architects had loved all their children equally. They saw how the architects had dreamed of a galaxy where all species lived together in peace. They saw how the architects had sacrificed themselves so that younger species could have a chance to build something beautiful. When the vision ended, the emperor stood alone because even his most loyal followers had been moved by what they saw. He fell to his knees and wept because he finally understood how small his pride had made him. Marcus sent a message to every world in the galaxy, saying that he would be leaving soon. Said that he did not want to rule over anyone, because that was not the way of the architects. He said that each species must find its own path and make its own choices, and that he trusted them to choose well. He said that he would be watching from far away, and that if the galaxy ever faced a threat too big for them to handle, he would return to help on the day he was supposed to leave. Marcus went to the observation deck of the Celestial Accord one last time. Princess Seraphine was waiting for him there because she had traveled across the galaxy to say goodbye. She looked different from the proud, cruel woman who had laughed at him so many months ago. There was kindness in her eyes now and wisdom that had come from pain and growth. She told Marcus that she would spend the rest of her life trying to undo the harm she had caused. She said that she would work to make the Valarians treat other species with respect, and that she would never forget the lesson he had taught her. Marcus smiled and told her that he was proud of how far she had come. He said that change was not about being perfect, but about trying to be better every day. Seraphine asked him if he would ever come back. Marcus said that he did not know because the universe was very big and there was much he needed to learn about his new existence. He said that the architects had given him a gift and a responsibility, and that he needed to understand both before he could truly help others. Seraphine took a step forward and hugged him, which surprised Marcus because Valarians rarely touched anyone. She whispered that she was sorry one more time, and he told her that he had forgiven her long ago. Then Marcus stepped back, and his body began to glow with golden light. He told Seraphine to remember that greatness was not about power over others, but about using power to lift others up. He said that the janitor who mopped floors was no less valuable than the princess who wore a crown, because everyone had a role to play in the great story of the universe. Seraphine promised to remember. Marcus rose into the air, and the light around him grew brighter and brighter until everyone on the observation deck had to cover their eyes when they could see again. He was gone, but his words remained in their hearts and in the hearts of everyone across the galaxy who had heard his message. Princess Seraphine became Empress Seraphine many years later, and she was known throughout history as the leader who united the galaxy in peace. She built schools where children of all species learned together, and she made laws that protected the weak from the strong. Whenever someone asked or why she cared so much about fairness and kindness, she would tell them about a janitor named Marcus, who had taught her the most important lesson of her life. And sometimes, late at night, when she looked up at the stars, she would see a golden light moving across the sky. She never knew if it was really Marcus or just her imagination, but it made her smile every time, because she knew that somewhere out there in the vast darkness of space, the keeper of the first light was watching over them all. The janitor who had been mocked and humiliated had become the guardian of the galaxy, and the princess who had laughed at him had become the empress who changed everything. Their story was told for thousands of years as proof that anyone could change, and that even the smallest person could shake the stars. Marcus Chun the Cleaner had shown the universe that true power came not from crowns or weapons, but from the courage to be kind when kindness was hardest. And that was the greatest lesson the architects had ever left behind.